Hey folks, how's it going? Welcome to our ARMS overview. Quickly today we're going to be running through the talents, rotations, and stat priority. We'll talk about some of the specifics with breakpoints if you're rocking a PVE build. We're in ARMS Warrior builds or glyphs that are rocking out there. The real popular talents in the community right now, Skull Splitter is the top one. Now if you're new to ARMS, go with Sudden Death. The passive ability is much more applicable. But Skull Splitter is the best way to incorporate that into your rotation. Stay tuned, we'll explain why. Next up, tier 30. So really what you're looking at, Stormbolt's great if you're looking for a single pretty long cooldown. Impending Victory has a few uses, but it's really kind of the outlier. You've got over 80% of the community right now rocking double time, so keep an eye open for that one. It's the go-to. Ultimately, one of the major wins with ARMS is some of their great mobility there, so really take advantage of it. Level 45, it's not much of a choice, but Massacre is really the major go-to. Really being able to rock Execute as much as possible complements us in every way as a pretty awesome ARMS warrior. Alternatively, you can go with Fever of Battle. You see that about 15% of the community. And that's really just tied to Whirlwind, and if you're rocking more of a cleave or an AoE build, we'll see this talent incorporated a little bit there. Level 60, for me personally, I always like having defensive stance. It just makes me feel like I've got a much better shot in the next little bit to survive if I am in trouble, or if I need to actually do an awkward little off taunt to save my tanks if I'm raiding. Alternatively, Bounding Stride really helps with your mobility. Level 75, the go-to for me is actually Warbringer. Seen over 95% of the community rocking this. The only potential alternative out there, In for the Kill, actually replaces Avatar on this build. It's really around your breakpoints. So right now in BFA, the top breakpoint for Warbreaker that it ties to is a 50% haste. Now nobody's going to have gear to get close to that at this point in time, but there is a 20% breakpoint. So you incorporate In for the Kill, and that Warbreaker increases your haste by 10% or by 20% if the target's below 20% health. So now you're starting to get a lot closer to actually incorporating the Warbreaker benefits, and it's really the bleed and damage over time component that you want to take advantage of with those breakpoints. Level 100, the go-to, almost exclusively the entire community is rocking Anger Management. Every 20 rage you spend reduces the remaining cooldown on Warbreaker and Bladestorm by 1 second. Can't beat that. Want to talk about high-end damage abilities? A real passive beneficial talent. Single target rotation for ARMS Warrior, it's really going to be conditional, and that's based off of the talents that you're rocking. If you're going like me and going with a little bit more of that Skull Splitter Warbreaker talent build that you just seen, this is how it's going to play out. So first priority, tag Warbreaker. Load up your enemies with that. If you are talented to Sudden Death, you might get an Execute proc. Let's act like you didn't though. Next you want to go with an Overpower. And what that's going to do is buff your next Mortal Strike. So tag that, and you find yourself in good shape really quick. Keep that Mortal Strike going as much as possible. That's really to keep your Deep Wounds buff and keep that damage over time cast on your target. So after your second Mortal Strike, rock Bladestorm. So real easy go-to. Lots of AoE damage, and that's ultimately while you're rocking Colossus Smash or Test of Might, and then your filler in between is actually Slam, or alternatively Whirlwind if there's a bunch of opponents around you. But under the basis, this is single target. Slam is your go-to. When you do have the Azeroth trait Test of Might enabled, delay using Slam or Whirlwind unless you're over 60% rage, in order to pool that rage for your next Colossus Smash. During the Colossus Smash, and following the Test of Might buff, use the abilities as normal, but not during that period. You want to keep Mortal Strike basically on cooldown to maintain Deep Wounds. It's the most important part of the rotation. There's always 3 global cooldowns between each cast, so it's almost impossible to overcap your overpowered buff stacks. So keep that in mind. In terms of opening rotation, the arms functionally, what you want to do is make sure you're using charge to initiate combat, gets you some really easy rage right off the bat, and then proceed with the rotation as what we just discussed. If you're talented Skull Splitter, delay using it in the opener until after Bladestorm, so that'll be your 5th ability that you'll go to, unless also delaying Bladestorm for any reason, such as an upcoming wave of multiple targets ahead of you, but you need to think for yourself in that situation. Multi-target rotation, assuming again that we've talented Skull Splitter and Warbreaker, for 2 to 3 targets, rock Sweeping Strikes right off the bat. Then, if that's only if you're not about to use Bladestorm. If you're going to use Bladestorm, don't waste your time. Drop Warbreaker after Sweeping Strikes. Now, while the Colossus buff is up, now you actually rock a little bit more of your Bladestorm, and that's going to sustain your Deep Wound buff on your enemy. If you've got it, hit and execute any opportunity you have. Alternatively, go with an Overpower, a Mortal Strike to sustain. You might get a Tactician proc like I just did there. So unless you're really solely focused on burst AoE damage with Bladestorm, Cleave is another opportunity that you can incorporate into your build. Really, in most scenarios where you'll see 2 to 3 targets, you're probably going to see 4+ targets in terms of a Mythic Plus or out in the world scenario. Sticking with that theme, if you are looking to maximize your AoE in a Mythic Plus situation, you want to go again, Sweeping Strikes right off the bat, fire up your Warbreaker. Then you either want to go to your Bladestorm or your Colossus Smash. Go with an Execute if you've got the proc. Again, Mortal Strike during Sweeping Strikes to contact your other opponents. Different than the 2 to 3 build, you want to rock your Whirlwind over your Colossus Smash buff. Go back to your Overpower, and then actually Whirlwind again. But to maximize your burst AoE, stack either with Avatar with Warbreaker and cast Bladestorm on as many of the targets as possible. Don't use Sweeping Strikes if you're about to use Bladestorm, so keep that in the back of your mind. Remember again, if you have talented Avatar, which isn't the recommended build right now, it does last twice as long as Colossus Smash. So you want to use it about 10 seconds ahead of time to ensure that the cooldowns overlapped with each other. Alright, to provide a little bit better understanding in terms of stats and stat power, Strength's your primary stat as a warrior. You really want to rock that as much as possible. It does provide significant attack power, which does contribute to the damage of all your abilities or auto attacks out there. Haste really compresses your rotation, and that's the sexy part of it. It reduces the time between your auto attack swings, the global cooldown, and the cooldown of your rotation abilities. So Mortal Strike, Skull Splitter, Cleave, their speed of them is all tied. Additionally, Bladestorm, Ravager, Rend, Deep Wounds, they all deal damage. Critical Strike increases the damage of attacks and abilities, and it also increases your rage generation by auto-attacking swings by 30%. Up next is actually Versatility on this build. So Versatility provides a flat increase to damage dealt and reduces damage taken by half as much. And finally, Mastery, which increases the damage done by Deep Wounds when it's applied and maintained using Mortal Strike, Execute, Bladestorm, and Cleave. So really, folks, where you want to go to if you want to maximize, you want to get your weapon DPS. That's by far the difference maker in terms of new damage. Once you've maxed out your weapon DPS, you want to go with Haste. It's just a small, incremental, maybe not even recognizable tick better than Critical Strike, but the two of them are head and shoulders above your remaining secondary stats. I mentioned it earlier, you've got a breakpoint at 20% around Haste. That's to tie up with Colossus Smash. Additionally, there's a 50% breakpoint out there. So hopefully as we advance into 8.2 and into 8.3, we'll see 4 racial bonuses out here. Now again, here's the caveat. The difference between your top end racial benefits and bottom end is almost negligible. It doesn't even matter to us. But in the event it matters to you, Lightforged Draenei, Undead, Goblins and Gnomes, Zandalari Trolls with the Kimbul buff are actually your top 5. Bottom 5 warriors for arms right now, Nightborn, Dark Iron Dwarf, Orc, Dwarf, and regular Draenei. So But the difference between the highest and the lowest is still less than 400 damage per second overall from a 23,000 damage per second. So like a percentage point from a racial benefit. Shouldn't be the real deciding factor unless you're looking to min-max and push all the high-end mythics, and if so, you're probably pretty used to doing racial swaps or rebuilding an army of alts if that's something that you prioritize. Alright folks, thanks for watching this vid. Drop it down in the comments, let me know what you like, let me know what I totally missed out on. Give me a thumbs up good, thumbs down bad. Again, thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you all soon. Alright, later.